This is not just something that happens during the initiation rites as you enter one of these societies. This is a longer process meant to sever you from your feelings of empathy towards others and sever you from your conscience, right? So that you can become a more valuable, soulless, psychopathic tool and instrument for the order.
Schaamte, schuldgevoel.
And we've talked about how Aries and these student secret societies are very entrenched in the university system, and how the VOC had a lot of influence on the university system. And what are we seeing here but the color blue, the color of Aries, very present in this scene, both with the seating arrangements and also the clothing of the professor. Remember, the professors back in the day, many of them were shareholders of the VOC, so very entrenched in that influence of the elite. And I believe that is still the case today. He might not even be aware of it, but I believe that he's very much a puppet of Aries. And there are proof of this influence of Aries upon the university in this very scene.
Schuldgevoel, de schaam.
And then we have Rosa, the protagonist of the story.
De technieken waar jullie aan werken zijn best prijzig.
Ik denk niet dat dit nu relevant is.
And notice here how she is mentioning this, right? Is mentioning like challenging her with how these techniques are very expensive, thus favoring a richer clientele. And who checks her but the professor himself, who's wearing the blue of Aries. Not that he's a member, right? But it could represent that he is like a puppet of the order, maybe while being unaware of it.
Ik neem aan dat jullie willen weten wie er stage mag lopen bij mevrouw de Hoop.
Now, if there are any Dutch people watching this video, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that at least 3 of those 5 names of the students who were picked for this very prestigious internship at the Hester de Hoog Institute have Posh names. So if you look at these names here,
Vera Carvalho.
so Vera Carvalho, normal name as far as I know.
Dirk Jan van der Voort.
Then Dirk Jan van der Voort, I believe that Dirk Jan could evoke him being Posh.
Hendrik Dreesman.
And Dreesman, I believe, is the name of an old money family.
Arnold van Zwieten.
And then Arnold van Schweden evokes nobility. And then the last mentioned student,
Fleur Borms.
her first name is Posh, Fleur. Her last name, I'm not sure. But having watched the show, I can tell you guys that, notice how surprised he is. He's like, oh, I was picked? Oh, okay, I guess so. Her brother is in Aries. So she's also upper class. So that means that at least, I would say 3 out of the 5 students are from upper class families, maybe even 4. And that would mean that at least, 60% of the students in this big classroom who got these internships are from the upper classes. Again, evoking how things are very much flipped to the advantage of the children of the elite. By the way, as a member of the not-so-secret Tall Guy Society, just a friendly reminder to my fellow members to always keep in mind the location of your armpit, because it is sometimes an head height. Also, don't be a creep. And definitely wear, good amount of deodorant. And that girl, by the way, that we just saw there, she's actually a member of Aries. And why would she be in a train to begin with? Why not in a Rolls Royce being driven by a butler back home? And also, why was she looking at Rosa like that? And here we meet Rosa's parents. Notice the red of passion. And I would also say in this show, the color red evokes individuality, your personal will, right? The red in the Dutch flag represents, willpower, courage, which I think are very individualistic values, whereas the blue is a collective value of loyalty. And that is, of course, what the order wants. They don't want individuals, they want members. And speaking of these colors, we have Jacob here. Jacob is part of a very wealthy family with connections to Aries. And notice that he's wearing navy jacket, navy hoodie, and then a red scarf. And if we go along with this hypothesis of these colors evoking these different things, right? Your own individuality and you as a person, and then these loyalty values, then we have potentially a visual cue to a psychological tension within Jacob, a tug-of-war between, on one hand, his loyalty to the wealthy upper classes, and again his personal will. And Rosa is dressed only in red. She's like pure will, pure personal will and ambition, right?
Ik probeer altijd tot het uiterste te gaan.
Very hardworking student. She wants to become a doctor, right? She's getting after it, very goal-oriented. And despite being a hardworking, gifted student, she did not land that internship, right? Because the playing field is not stacked in her favor, is in fact not even fair. And who might this trio be? Do we notice any of them, guys? And who do we have here but the initiatrix from the prologue, the young woman who oversaw the initiation of the girl.
Carmen.
And the young woman opposite her is the one who was on the train watching Rosa with a vaguely disapproving gaze in her eye. Needless to say, these are not your average run-of-the-mill Posh students, especially not Carmen here and her brother sitting opposite, who's a regent family, right? They go back, way back to the VOC. And notice here above the roof of the Rijksmuseum, we see first one star shining, then the other, then both together, aligned above the roof of the Rijksmuseum. These planets, I believe, would be Venus in the lower position and Jupiter in the higher position. So this is a very curious detail to have these two planets aligned perfectly and both shining brightly, one after the other, calling our attention to them. What might be the significance of that? Well, Venus rules material success and finance, and Jupiter, of course, is the planet of expansion and abundance. So by aligning them, you can see that as being the expansion and abundance of financial and material wealth. And that is, of course, exactly what the VOC attained, right, as they expanded their maritime capitalistic empire to attain unmatched material wealth. So very interesting that we've seen this planetary alignment as Rosa and Jacob drive through the city with these Aries members. And they're now going to the Rijksmuseum, and we're now moving from a red setting to a blue setting. By the way, such a vibe going to a museum, drinking champagne. You guys down? You just show up, I'll bring the champagne and we'll go and do some occult analysis of paintings. So we see this sphere of influence being very, very old, going back to the Dutch Golden Age and being very foundational for the current Dutch society that exists today, economically, politically, financially, right? And egregorically, but we'll get into that later. And here we're seeing one of the ships of the VOC, one of the battleships specifically. The VOC, again, was not a normal corporation. It was a state within a state. It had its own army, 10,000 soldiers, 40 massive warships, and this is a model of one of them. And this was a way that they exerted their will on the sea, right, to attain unmatched wealth. So that makes sense why they would call the secret society Aries, right, because they descend from the VOC, and the VOC was a very Martian force. Again, we see alignment with Venus, with Jupiter, to attain all this financial wealth, but it was through their Martian will that they attained that success. And here we have a painting of Rembrandt. This is the Night Watchers. And Rembrandt is very key to the show actually, because the cinematography of Aries is directly inspired by Rembrandt, with several of his techniques being applied to the visual fabric of the show. This is not just to make the show look very nice, or to make it look more Dutch, if you will, it's to express the underlying theme of the story. And of course we have this chiaroscuro, creating a very dramatic interplay between shadow and light. And we see that, of course, in Aries as well, this dynamic interplay between light and dark, and then especially the technique of tenebrism, of shadow. And that is something that is going to become more and more prominent the further we move into the show, and the more the shadows spread and envelop the characters, the deeper they move into this elite underworld of Amsterdam. Carmen just reminiscing about her family, right? How they sailed around and just utterly dominated the seas. It's basically just a living room, right? And white is the third color on the Dutch flag between red and blue. Maybe you can contemplate what that might signify and why Carmen is very much associated with the color white in the show.
Jullie zijn geen normale studentenvereniging, of wel? We zijn een genootschap. Voor rijke studenten. Niet per se. Voor mensen met potentie. En wat moet ik doen om daarbij te komen?
And by the way, for you guys who are interested in astral travel, I believe we have an astral projection, or maybe a lucid dream, in the next scene here. This is not a normal dream that she's having. In fact, she's going to encounter a certain entity in the show. And that is something that can happen on the astral. You might encounter both angels and demons and everything in between. Notice here in this scene the sun evoking that Rosa connected with a soul, at least for now. And interesting that we see this six-pointed star here, because we also saw the six-pointed star, the Seal of Solomon, the Star of David, on a pillar at the Rijksmuseum. I thought that was actually just random, but now we're seeing a six-pointed star here. So again, six-pointed star, the hexagram is a symbol of Tiferet. Then you can put it on Tiferet in the Tree of Life, and the points will connect to the different spheres. And so I see that as a symbol of the soul, actually. But a certain secret society is luring her closer into their sphere of influence. And we saw where that led the other young woman, and that is away from the sun, right? Deeper into shadow.
En is niet in staat om mee te draaien in onze... Bij patiënten met een depressie overactief is, deze patiënten activeren uitsluitend het subgenuale gebied.
So this is very interesting and potentially very relevant. He's talking about a part of the brain that is more active in people with depression. It's interesting that when we think about depression, we probably think about underactivation, but actually it has to do with an overactivation in a certain part of the brain. I'm sure an underactivation in other parts. So in depressed people, the subgenual area is more active. And what is interesting here is that the class was visited by Hester de Hoog, and she has an institute where they do deep brain stimulation and also surgical intervention into the brains of patients. And so I could see how she might actually be working with this area to lessen the activity there to a lower depression in people. But what is interesting is that this area of the brain is a bridge between the neocortex, right, so the higher sort of rational functioning of the mind, and our emotional brain, our limbic system. So by making this area underactive would lead to lowered empathy, a lessened sort of understanding of social consequences, and thus greater sort of tendency to impulsive antisocial behavior. So as a consequence, underactivity in this part of the brain could lead to what is clinically termed acquired sociopathy or pseudo-psychopathy. And I believe that that is in fact exactly what these secret societies are doing. They're not doing surgical intervention on the members, but they are moving them through a ceremony that is developed, that is architected to have a similar effect, to sort of disconnect the part of the brain that connects them to empathy and to sociability, so that these members become sort of void of bad conscience when it comes to their actions, so they can become more valuable assets in sort of being extensions of Aries. This is not just something that happens during the initiation rites as you enter one of these societies. This is a longer process meant to sever you from your feelings of empathy towards others and sever you from your conscience, right? So that you can become a more valuable, soulless, psychopathic tool and instrument for the order, right? The last thing they want is a person with high ethical standards, who has empathy for humanity, and who is connected to their own soul and their own inner sense of right and wrong.
Je zelf hier voor de klas komen staan?
Nee, ik wil gewoon worden uitgedaagd. Maar u kunt dat blijkbaar niet.
Again, we see here the conflict between the red-dressed Rosa and the blue-dressed professor, who is perhaps unwillingly a puppet of Ares. And it's like Eyes Wide Shut. We see a lot of this red and blue with the students and throughout the show. But I think the colors evoke different things in this movie. And although I like certain similar things as well, the red specifically. And who knows, maybe there are some overlap between the color symbolism in both movies. What do you guys think?
Het zijn geen vrienden, het is...
Het Aresgenootschap.
The sun is going down, and this is the night that Rosa is going to enter the sphere of influence of Ares.
Laat het gaan.
It's a cool library.
Ga zitten. Heb je je nooit afgevraagd hoe het kan dat zo'n klein landje als Nederland zo rijk en machtig is geworden?
I mean, that right there is the golden question, right? How was it possible for such a tiny country as the Netherlands to become so immensely powerful, so immensely wealthy? When we look at the VOC, we have not just the first mega corporation in the world, but the most profitable mega corporation in the world. And it's crazy because the VOC had 50,000 employees, 10,000 soldiers, right? So a workforce, if you will, of 60,000 people. And these 60,000 people outdo the GDP, right? The collective work output of multiple major countries combined, several major mega corporations combined. How is that possible? I mean, their productivity must have been like 100x of like some big corporation like Apple, for instance. So how was it indeed possible for Netherlands? And when she says, well, how Netherlands became so rich and powerful, it's how did the VOC become so rich and powerful? Because the financial infrastructure of the Netherlands was built around serving the VOC, right? So that's why the first stock exchange was developed. It was to fund the endeavors of the VOC. Now, while we can attempt to offer an esoteric solution to this question, right? We can look at it economically. The show goes into a deeper, esoteric, occult, psychologically hidden reason for why they were able to become so rich and powerful. But to have that answered, we have to watch the rest of the show. So let's get on with it.
Rosa, wat wil je eigenlijk?
And there's another question. Why is this order interested in Rosa to begin with? She's not a member of the upper echelon.
Ik doe zo mijn best.
Is it because of that? Is it because she is so hardworking, is so determined, is so ambitious, has that VOC mentality of wanting to win?
Wat wil jij? Winnen.
Or is there another reason, a more esoteric reason?
Waar is Rosa?
Here we see her climbing through the cloth tunnel representing the birth canal, and she's emerging on the other side where the fifth death is enveloping them, and we have their old skin, if you will, being shed, and they're being put into new clothes, serf clothes it looks like. They're kneeling, both to show their place in the hierarchy and to evoke them as being reborn into this new world. And these masks that they are being given is a Morita mask, which you bite into on a button, thus rendering you blind and speechless. So that's very much like the state of a newly born child who can't really see anything and who can't talk, right? And who can't walk. And that is the state that these aspiring members, these aspirants, are being placed in, right? A state of kneeling and being blind and unable to talk. So this very much solidifies their place in this new world that they have entered. So that was episode 1, and see you for episode too.